Hi, my name is Talesian, and I'd like to do something a little different for this video. There have been several streamers that I've been watching for a while that have sort of inspired me to be who I am today. One of them is DarthMicrotransaction. I've watched his channel for a long time and I like his style. And he does a bi-weekly podcast on his channel called Tavern Talk. And recently he and Ghazi did an interview with one of the developers from Diablo 4, and I'd like to comment on it. So let's go ahead and watch the video and see what they have to say. And I've not watched this video, so I'm going in blind, and I'll just make my comments as we go.
I just finished the Diablo 4 live interview with Blizzard's Adam Jackson. This is going to be a quick recap of all of the questions that we asked during the interview. Question number one was, are we going to be seeing more focus on the Paragon board now that the gameplay focus has shifted into the post-100 realm?
My personal opinion talking here, but I think that there's definitely room to make Paragon more interesting. Adding new boards and things is always on the table. That is something that we can do, and probably is something that we will do. The way that we kind of think of Paragon is that it's kind of your one-stop shop where we try to make stats cool. Why you care about strength, why you care about whatever stats you're chasing, like it's one of those places where we try to make it a little bit more interesting and robust. I think we did a decent job at the launch game with Paragon, but I think that there's more that we could add to the depth of the system to make it just more appealing. You know, we did a little bit of that in season 2. If you remember, we started adding scaling mechanics where we turn some of your stats that are always additive into multiplicative.
That's something I like. They're going to take the Paragon board and they're going to be doing some more with it. And I think that's good. That, to me, the Paragon board is one of those aspects of the game that has a lot of places that they could go and develop. Lots of stats that they can change, lots of different abilities that they could map into. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they have in store for that.
Scaling stats. I would expect that we do more in the future. Of course, nothing to announce, but that's kind of how we're thinking about it right now, is that it's cool. We think there's more opportunity to do cool things there. Something simple like adding new boards, yeah, I don't think there's really a high risk there, and it's something that I could totally see us doing. That being said, there are some like UX issues that I think we know about with Paragon. Like, you know, it can be a pain to reset and fill in all the many little blips that you have to. Like,
yeah, they really need to work on the UX for the board a bit. One of the things that I was really happy for in one of the earlier patches is the ability to basically refund all of your points. But what they really, in my opinion, they need to focus on is more of a loadout system, even if it's just partial loadouts. You know, if I know that, for instance, my first couple of boards are not going to change, let me go ahead and save that loadout and then make changes as I go into the rest of the board using whatever points I have left. I think that would be a good way to go forward.
I think those are actually more concerning issues that I would rather see us tackle than only adding new content. I think we can do both, of course, but these are kinds of the things of the problems that we're looking to solve, I guess you could say, with Paragon. Simplicity is always a factor because we do want people to understand
Yes.
our game, and ARPGs are notoriously crunchy. But if
Oh god, ARPGs are definitely crunchy. I remember some of the earlier days when I was playing Path of Exile. Um, if you ever look at the passive skill tree board for Path of Exile, it is huge, and then they add another huge board for the Atlas. I admit it would be very, very hard for me to come up with a build video for anything in Path of Exile these days. I'm hoping that Diablo 4 does not go down that route. I'm hoping that they'd make it difficult so that there's some strategy, but not so difficult that it's overwhelming.
there is a place that we can be a little crunchier, I would say it is in Paragon.
Question number 2 is about clarity in information. They recently updated saying there's going to be changes to temporary affixes as well as some more balance changes before the launch of Season 4, and we asked whether or not we could get clarity on these changes since people are going to be deciding their class and build before the season launches.
When it comes to patch notes and what we show to players between PTR and live, is that we kind of have rules and guidelines for how we present patch notes and what we put in them between releases, and PTR is kind of a special case because PTR, we're introducing new content to you for the first time, but then the live patch is actually when we introduce that content for real, and I'm using air quotes, right? Because not everybody is expected to play the PTR. PTR is also notoriously not balanced because it's way earlier in development than when we would normally release something. And so, you know, managing expectations and how we present patch notes is something that we're still figuring out.
Now that's a good thing. I really like the way that the D4 team has been going through with their patch notes, and I like the way that they do this kind of, hey, we're doing this patch ahead of time. Here are the notes. So you've got like about a week to prepare, and then they let the patch go with any other changes they find in other balancing and stuff. I like that. That's a good idea. And I really think that the PTR for this patch note for Season 4 was a huge positive for the game.
What that really means is, when we introduce whole new systems to the game, we don't specify every single little detail of them. As an example, in the PTR, when we introduce the recipes, we don't list every single tempering recipe and what the numbers are right now. Notes are already huge, it would blow them out. So
Yeah.
In the future, I think we can show more. But as far as like specifics, if you want to know some of the
Yeah, and I really do think they need I agree with Adam here, definitely. They need to show some specifics. Maybe these are the tempering manuals going to introduce, and these are the recipes. These are the types of recipes in them, not necessarily all of the numbers. There needs to be a little bit of mystery, a little bit of the discovery to the game. But I really think they've done a good job on the patch notes, but they can definitely do better.
things like that are changing with tempering. There's a whole lot of number changes. Most of them are minor and aren't really that big of a deal. We did shift around what stats are in what recipes and that kind of stuff to make more sense based on feedback. And then we did adjust some things that were just the typical, this is early in development and wasn't intended at all, but it's PTR, so this is when you get to see it. The Knights of Golem Masteries in that category. I think people were getting crazy, like 25 plus or something ranks. No,
oh yeah, there were some of those. I've seen some builds that had like 18, 19, 20, 25 ranks in Golem Mastery, and the golems were just destroying everything on the map. That's definitely a bit much, and I'm glad that they're toning that down a little bit. Also, they did mention in the patch notes, for instance, that they're going to be toning down the number of whirlwinds that barbarians can do and such, and I think that's a good thing. You really don't want to have the servers or your end computer kind of blow up and catch fire while you're in the middle of the game. It's usually not good for the game.
Supposed to be just like every single other passive that you get. It's only in very few slots, and it's very special when you get it.
Since this had to do with the public test round, the follow-up question was, did you guys get what you were hoping to get out of the public test round?
Oh, absolutely. In spades. When we release very large swaths of the game, like I would say the launch was the closest to this. Season 2 was moderately close to this, but I think this is bigger than that. We gave people stats and powers that they never had access to, where we let you get bonus projectiles across the board or area size. Those are very high-risk things. Not only are they scary because of balance, but they're scary because of like PC performance and breaking servers and stuff.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, some of the I had a chance to party with a couple of barbarians who were doing whirlwinds, and when they both did whirlwinds during the PTR, I swear to God, my PC was having a heart attack in the middle of it. It was fun to watch. It was great to enjoy, especially at Legion events and world bosses when you would see all of these dust devils and tornadoes go over the place, but it would crawl my PC to almost a standstill. But you know what? Hey, sometimes the PTR, that's what that's for. So I think it was fun.
Because a lot of our game wasn't made in mind with every projectile could not just have one more, but be doubled in the amount. Or, the size of these skills were handcrafted to be, this is the size. And so we have to figure out how we're going to manage these things for the long term and be healthy in the game. PTR was incredibly helpful for that. But I would say the bigger important one was like, how does the game feel? Like the playing through the whole experience of tempering, masterworking, and that progression. We can have an idea of it, but when you have 50, 100, 200, even 1,000 people playing it, it's not nearly as much information as you would think compared to like 10 million people playing it, right? Or whatever. They'll find.
Yeah, that is definitely why I think that the PTR was one of the best ideas they did. The Season 4 patch is a huge change for the game. I've seen a lot of streamers and a lot of other content creators say that basically the Season 4 patch is Diablo 4 actually coming out of beta and into finally version 1.0. And I really feel that the PTR was very helpful in that for the decision for the devs. And I'm really looking forward to getting in there and going through the game and playing out the changes that they've got for Season 4. I really think it's put the game on a good, solid level, and I think it's going to be great for going forward.
Find things in 5 minutes that might take us 5 days.
Question number 4 was, now that itemization is being completed and launched in Season 4, what is the next major focus for the development team?
Immediate future, I think actually the focus of the team is on reacting to Season 4 and this big upheaval that we made to the game. I am very sure that there will be cracks in tempering and masterworking and the player journey as far as, you know, the pit and how all of this feels when put together of like how good the game actually is. And those cracks are gonna need to be iterated on and filled a little bit of like, hey, you know, we need more tempering recipes here, or hey, the progression of the pit doesn't feel that great there, or whatever, right? So making those and refining those to be good is the immediate largest concern by a pretty good amount. But think
And I think that's a great idea. I think it's looking at the game in a very positive light. The pit is such a major change to how Diablo 4 Endgame is. Yes, it is sort of like the Diablo 3 Greater Rift system, but it's so much more. It's a way to open up a way to increase item power, and it's a way to expand and really test your build and kind of give you that leap that you need to get to those uber bosses, those level 200 bosses. That it's I really think that the having no major theme for season 4 is a very smart idea. It gives the devs a chance to absorb all this information, to see how people play it, to see where they're played, to see where they focus their time, and then make the corrections that are necessary for going forward in the game, especially with the first expansion pack coming out. So that I think Diablo 4 is going to be in a much better shape now than it was a few months ago.
thinking a little bit more long term, like things that aren't
Sure.
immediate reactions to season 4. But I think that there's still going to be room to try and make the end game better for longer. Also on the class side, personally, one of the things that's on my mind a lot is trying to catch up other classes to Barbarian, because Barbarians have more weapons. This has been a big thorn in our side for a very long time, of that they kind of have 2 class mechanics and everybody else has 1. And so our current plan is to kind of juice up those other classes so that they're really crazy, impactful, and good, and feel awesome, so that they kind of make up for the lack of aspects that Barbarians get. We kind of addressed it a little bit in season 4 with the Necromancer, where we just juiced the Book of the Dead and made it crazy, powerful, and good. Tried to do it in a way that wasn't just numbers, you know, like make it cool. And so we're gonna see how that goes, but I want to do that for the other classes.
I was just curious.
I'm really looking forward, and Gazzy's going to comment on this. I have a feeling the way he just started, but I know that one of the builds that I definitely want to play for season 4 is a Necro build, and I'd like to do minion based. I really love playing a Necromancer in Path of Exile. It's always been my favorite build, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how the Necro builds change with the new season mechanic in Diablo 4.
I was just curious, like we talk about end game, that's the focus. End game, end game, end game. I'm curious about the definition. Like, what are we talking about when we say end game?
We used to think of endgame as everything after the campaign, but in my mind, it's when you have access to all of the activities that you can do in the game, which to me would now probably be whenever you go into the pit, because there's no activity after that that is like a new activity that you could not access at all. Either that or level 100, you know, if you want to think about it that way.
Since the answer to
Now, that's a good way of looking at it. Also, one of the problems I have with Path of Exile, and I think Path of Exile is a great game, but there is so much to do. It's can be almost, you get this analysis paralysis. I mean, do I want to go to Delve? Do I want to do beast crafting? Do I want to do all sorts of different activities, mapping? So it you tend to kind of, it splits your focus a bit. Like in the current Necromancer on a Necropolis campaign, I know I need to do some delve, and I haven't even started delve yet. I'm only getting into mapping. I've managed to, using my atlas, being able to start to fine tune it so I get the things that I want. But I don't want to completely be locked out of things, but I also don't want them to show up all the time either. So I think there's a point where you can have too much end game. So I'm hoping Diablo goes that route where they find the end game that they want, and they focus it, they fine tune it, and they don't start bloating everything.
this question was they're focusing on in-game. I asked the follow-up question. How are you able to continually progress the in-game, considering that players consume content quicker than you can development, while you're also at a deficit in in-game already? That plus the fact the level 1 to 100 is faster than it's ever been, players are reaching in-game even faster than before. So how are they fixing this problem?
Oh God, this is a very long answer, and I could go into it for a long time, so I'll try to keep it brief. It's a very difficult problem, and it is one that I think every ARPG has, and it's one that we all have to kind of live with and mitigate, but there isn't a perfect forever solution. Players want content, and our game is a power fantasy. That's what ARPGs are, right?
Yes.
We sell you on, you do things to become more powerful, to have a new mountain to climb, to be more powerful, to have a new mountain to climb. Problem is, there are only so many mountains that we could make. The first
Yeah.
thing we try to do is create as many mountains as we can. But like you said, people are crazy and they consume content really, really quick. Some of them do, some of them not so much. And we have to balance between those two player types, which is a whole nother conversation. For the people that can consume that content quickly, we want to make sure that there's things for them to do that are interesting and meaningful. And so this is why you see a very common way that ARPGs are designed is that we use random generated dungeons and random generated content for the end game. And why we do things like scale things either pretty hard or infinitely so that you have a challenge against your player power, right? Like player power goes up, you need something to fight against it as you're getting better. That's kind of like the box that we're in when we're designing. And a lot of our work as designers is how do we make fun content and resolve these issues as best we can. And so you're going to see us, you know, kind of bounce back and forth of like infinitely scaling content, but also matching that with milestone content. Aspirational content is another word that people like to use that I like, of, you know, like Uber Lilith or these things where it's like, I get this thing, I see this thing, it's a fixed difficulty, I want to get good enough to beat that, and then I feel good and I can either stop or try and go to the next thing until there's things that run out, and then I'm happy.
Yeah, and I think that's also a very good way that they're doing things. As he mentioned, there's only so much that you can do. There's only so many mountains that you can climb. And I think that finding that balance between aspirational content and milestone content, I really think it's a fine line, but I really think the devs of Diablo 4 can hit that. I think, for instance, the devs at Path of Exile, I think they've kind of gone a little off the deep end a bit on some of their things. There's just way too much to do with the end game, and it's really hard to get focused. I'm hoping that if they can find a good focus and they can find a good path on this, that Diablo 4 will have a much stronger end game in the long term.
Leave happy.
Ghazzy had a follow-up question to this, asking if they're trying to focus more on the new players and the new player acquisition or on the reoccurring in-game users that are already very familiar with the game.
There's actually a lot of different classes of players and the types of people that play Diablo 4 because it's such a large game. You know, we're trying to appeal to many different types of people that play RPGs and even those that this is their introductory game. So our task is a little different than some other games where, you know, they have a more specific focus. We try to grab it all. We're greedy.
Rolling into more content questions, we asked about Overworld and Strongholds, and if there was the potential to continue developing these. This actually ended up turning into a little bit more of a, not argument, but debate around what actually constitutes as repetitive content that is enjoyable.
Now, that is a very good question, Darth. One of the contents that I really enjoy in Diablo 4 is the strongholds. I thought it's a wonderful idea. You go to this zone, you defeat this mini quest, and then it opens up a whole new zone for you. That can be waypoints, it could be new quest options. There are some nightmare dungeons that are locked behind them, and I think it's a wonderful idea. I would really like, I'm hoping in this question that they have found a way or will find a way to take that content and make it maybe not necessarily repeatable, but redoable in some way.
I think there's a concept that's very interesting. I would advise you and any of your followers who really want to get into game design or want to talk better about game design. There was a really great GDC presentation made by a guy named Alex Jaffe, and he gave one of the best presentations I've ever seen on game design. And he gave the presentation on something called cursed problems in game design. When you make a game of a certain archetype, you immediately make a bunch of promises to the player. There are these things that are so fundamental to the foundation of your game that you can't get away from them, and they're kind of your partner forever and a weight on your back that you have to deal with that you never get rid of, but you can mitigate. A cursed problem, I would argue, in ARPGs like Diablo and any other game, you'll probably have seen this problem, is that they are games of efficiency. We promise you player power is a big reason why you play these games. You start off as this peon person that kind of sucks and isn't very strong, and you grow into this really crazy master of magic or strength or whatever that can do incredible things. The way that we deliver you on that promise is we give you power as you play the game more and progress through the activities, usually in the form of gear, but also in other ways too, right? Skill points, Paragon, whatever it is. What that translates to is that anything that you are doing in the game that isn't progressing your power is very hard to sell a player on. And it's
yes, definitely. If you're not, if I'm not getting better with my character, then it feels like what I'm doing is a waste of time. And why am I doing it? Why is it in the game? And I'm not just talking about these little like 0.1% things, which, you know, sign of the extra bonus damage on Tuesdays meme was kind of about. But really need to be noticeable, tangible improvements to your character that you can literally see and feel as you're going through. I think the 1 to 50 in Diablo 4 does that really well, but when you get past 50, when you get into the nightmare dungeons, when you get into some of these other activities, you know, past 50, that's where it kind of goes off the rails a little bit. You're not really feeling as you're getting massively powered. You're only feeling getting a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. And it tends to kind of pull you out of that power fantasy.
Harder to sell them if it's not a repeatable activity that they can keep doing to get stronger and stronger. When you ask me, hey Adam, what do you think of strongholds or world bosses or Uber Lilith balance or a whole lot of other problems, strongholds are intended, and why they are cool and why they go against the rest of our game and why it's really hard for us is that they are meant to be one-shot, awesome, kind of story-based, really handcrafted, curated content, right? I would equate this to Uber Lilith statues, where we got this question the other day.
Sure.
The campaign experience, we get a question. These are all actually the same question, which is, hey, you people on D4 made this one-shot experience that we really love and is cool. We want to do it more. The problem is the moment you cross that line from one-shotting in it being cool to being a repeatable activity, now that activity is competing with everything else in the game that is repeatable content. Because now Strongholds has to compete against Helltide, Nightmare Dungeons, The Pit, Gathering Uniques, all of that, or it has to fit in there in some way.
So what makes Strongholds different? Like, why can't we do an Uber version of a Stronghold, since people say they want to replay it, but we can do an Uber version of bosses that are already in the game?
We absolutely can. But then you've changed it from one shot, this is a cool experience that's very unique, and that is what the fantasy is of people that like it. Now you've changed that to repeatable content that you're going to do 10, 20, 100 times over. That puts a lot more design constraint and limitations of what you can make that content. When you do something 500 times, you care about things that you wouldn't care about if you did it one time. Why did you have to ride your horse to Nightmare Dungeons when we launched the game? It was fun the first time, world building, immersion, really cool. Doing it 500 times, because that's all that you're doing at your end game, not so fun.
Just for the sake of the debate here. So let's say we wanted Uber Strongholds, and you say, well, you know, DM, you liked it the first time, you might not like it the 100th time. And I say, fair enough. Well, what if we took some of the rewards I would either get from the pit, like a grab bag? We take some of the pit rewards, we take some of the Uber level 200 rewards, and we throw almost like a world boss loot pinata as an option to be one of these mountains that you mentioned earlier. Maybe we don't want to make it the best thing. Maybe we want to make it a breakup of the experience so that we can get basically the same resources we got to get lately anyway from something else, but it gives us variety in terms of gameplay. Now, I'm not arguing this is the best way to go with the game. I'm just curious about the thought process behind that.
I think that's a good question. The answer is yes, we can. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Usually it doesn't. The reason why, in my experience, it's really hard to tell somebody, hey, you have option A and option B. Option A is 100% efficient. Option B is 70% efficient. What does 100% of players do? Maxroll makes guides. What is the best Nightmare Dungeon you want to do? Everybody makes guides. What is the quickest way to do the thing? What is the most efficient?
I feel like what makes an ARPG great is to make people distracted from the fact that they are playing an ARPG. Because in reality, we are doing the same thing over and over again with the only goal of improving our character. So having options, whether or not they are slightly less rewarding, but the fact that you have options to engage with for the sake of in-game replayability, longevity, would allow you to be distracted from that fact and actually enjoy your time.
Definitely. I'll admit, a lot of these activities, as Ghazzy mentioned, you do them over and over again. I find them fun. One of the things I liked in Season 3, I actually kind of moved away from doing Nightmare Vaults, Nightmares in Season 3, excuse me, and I started doing Vaults because I really liked the layout. Yes, it meant I was doing the same basic runs over and over again, but I knew, for instance, I would get these pedestals, I would go through the store, I would go through this area, and then I would have this big boss fight, and then I would get my loot. And it was rewarding to me in that respect. Now, do I want to do that? Do I want that to be my only endgame option? I don't think so. Now, I would not mind if they brought like 1 or 2 vaults back later on, maybe rotated them through, made them like nightmare dungeons you have to find keys for. I think that might be a good idea too. Take some of these ideas that they've got and just rotate them through in small bits here and there. Kind of like what they did with some of the items, for instance, that you could get. You could get some of the malignant items from season 1, you can get them in season 3, and so forth. I kind of like that idea.
We do things like this. Some ways, for example, that we get you to do a variety of activities, because we do want you to, is like a common strategy is we gate certain rewards behind certain activities, which makes you need to go and do multiple things, right? I think a better solution, we've kind of moved a little bit more in this, is you get some activities or materials or whatever from many places. There is one place that is the most efficient, but you're getting pseudo efficiency somewhere else, and that feels really good. Example of this would be doing Hell Tides with Whispers, and we want to do that and do that more. And that, I think, is kind of an answer for your Uber Strongholds question. I'm not saying, by the way, my answer is not we can't do Uber Strongholds because of these problems. What I'm saying is I'm trying to teach you why it's not so easy as just like, hey, make Uber Strongholds replayable and now everybody's going to love them immediately. We think about that content differently now.
Totally.
And that requires...
Yes, that is good. If you read through the patch notes for season 4, they've taken some of the masterworking and some of the tempering materials, and you can get them from world bosses, you can get them from Legion events, you can get them from Whispers, you can get them from Nightmare Dungeons, as well as going through the specific season 4 options to get them. And I think that's good, because then it gives you that little bit of variety. You don't, while the content you're not necessarily repeating the content over and over and over again. You're still getting a reward for doing some of the content. It's not as 100% efficient, but it gives you that, okay, so I'm doing this, but I'm still moving a little bit forward in my pit. I'm still moving it forward in my masterwork. I'm still moving it forward in my tempering, because I'm gaining some power and I'm having fun, because, world bosses are a fun group event. Legions are a fun group event. Those are really things that I think they really hit really well on. And I think the idea that they're spreading around the bonuses some, so that, I can still make some progress by, if I take 5 minutes out and do this Legion event, or 10 minutes out and do this World Boss event, I can still make some progress on my overall character. I think that's a wonderful thing.
There's a little more thought and care, not just in rewards, but how it feels to go through it over and over again, right? Because it's fixed.
The next question was about skill diversity. Unique items in Diablo 4 are one of the only ways to fundamentally change what a skill actually does. The question to this is, are you planning to add this variability to skills outside of the skill tree and unique items?
Fun fact, when we were originally designing things in the game, a lot of the changing of the skills was actually in the skill tree and in we called them A/B choices, but the different upgrades you could get for your skill. And we moved a little bit away from that. Some of them are still a little transformative. I think that we can make them a little bit more so in the skill tree as we do in the future. That's one way that I think we can make the skill tree interesting. We ended up doing more legendaries and uniques as the space that we do that, because we knew that items were so important, and being excited for a late game item to drop was a very core part of the game. We've kind of now made that a lot better with like greater affixes, for example, and things in season 4. So I think there is more room to make transformative upgrades in other places than items. I also am very comfortable with the system that we have now, and I kind of like it. It gives you obvious things to chase with items, and it feels good to get an item that is a big upgrade that changes.
I love that. They're really, I think they're really honing in on one of the really positive ways that D4 handles item acquisition now with this new change. I'm so looking forward to playing season 4 because of it. They're making it different. They're making the Ubers really be Uber. They're giving them some of these special abilities you can only find on them, and I think that's a fantastic way to go forward.
Changes how you play. So I guess I'd be open to feedback from people. Like, is there a place that you think is superior to items to get these kinds of effects? Like, is it cooler to have it be deterministic in the Paragon board versus you're farming for something and you see the moment that it drops, it transforms your gameplay?
I agree.
I was wondering how these unique items or skill altering modifiers, no matter where you get them, how that would impact the class design when it comes to focusing on keeping or maintaining the specific fantasies of classes.
So when I think of a build, or a team thinks of a build, we try and think of the entire package and we compare it to the whole other package of a class. I don't think of a build like, I don't know, Frozen Orb, right? When I think of like the total power and coolness and strength and all of that, there's a journey that needed to be made, but I think of it as you end with all the things. When we think about like designing a new class, or when we're first designing these classes, we have to think of, how do we make an interesting and good player journey from the beginning when you first use a skill, making that as impactful and cool as possible, while at the same time balancing against you need to leave room for growth and making things crazy and also to make it better. Some skills.
Yeah, like what they did with Frozen Orb and the Fractured Winter Glass. If you didn't get a chance to play on the PTR, the Fractured Winter Glass really kind of blew Frozen Orb out of the water. It made it the build for Season 4 for Sorcerers. But they went ahead and they saw what they did to it and they toned it down, make it a little more reasonable, because you could get crazy with it. There were certain combinations of Fractured Winter Glass and skill points and Paragon abilities that just, it would just spawn Winter Orbs or Frozen Orbs all over the place. So they've toned it down a bit, but yeah, having that power trip, having that power fantasy, that's part of the game. So I'm glad that they're finding these ways to do it. They're finding these ways to give you what you want, but they're doing it within limits.
Skills are easier to do than others with that, I would say. We definitely had a lot of things before the game came out, discussions about like, hey, this skill it feels really crappy early on. And we're like, yeah, it gets really crazy later on though. They're like, yeah, but who's going to pick it up if it feels really shitty early on? You have to balance the two things. And that one is like, it's just a bunch of discussions and iteration, even when the game is live, of people complain about it, right? And we're like, yeah, we agree. And then we change it. Example, that would be like Barbs and Druids for a while have been complaining that early game kind of sucks, but then late game they're powerhouses. And that's kind of been the identity.
Oh, yeah. I remember earlier, Season 1, Season 2, and even in the beta, I could not do a Barbarian or Druid from level 1. They were just, it just felt like I was banging my head against the wall trying to level all the way up and trying to get anywhere with these characters. I mean, if you were able to get to a certain point, then the doors were wide open for you. But it was getting to that point that was just so difficult.
And so we've been like alleviating over and over again of like basic skills are a little better. They're a little better. We don't want to go too far, but we keep making them better, right? So that's kind of how we think of it. We think of the whole package and we try to make sure that your journey is enjoyable and good.
And one of the other things that I've noticed too, and this is something that a lot of game developers really need to remember about and need to focus on. You can give rewards and power to players, but you need to remember how much you give and be careful how much you give. And the developers saw this in one of the early patches for Diablo 4, when it became the nerf patch. When they took back a lot of that power, it really hurt the players a lot. So if you want to give the players, you give them a little bit at a time, then okay, this works, okay, give them a little bit more. But you've got to be careful as to how much you give them, because if you start taking it back, the players are going to start to get a little upset about that.
We get into the rapid fire portion of questions, in which we go through a large list and try to get fast responses. The first question was raids coming to the game.
First, I would say this is just Adam's personal opinion, not the team. I think raids are interesting and cool. They would present quite a few hurdles for us to overcome that make things tough. Even now, we have a problem where we're always competing against solo players' efficiency versus group play efficiency. There's a lot of people that play Diablo and RPGs that really have a strong identity with wanting to play by themselves and not be required to go into a group. And if we put in this type of content where we say, hey, you must go into a group to play this, then we have to reconcile that of like, how do we either balance that around solo players do it as well, and if they do, then why is it group content? Or too bad, you have to also be in a group to engage with this. And
that's one of the problems I have with some MMOs. Lord of the Rings Online has really, I think, done a really good job of it. They have this whole system now they've incorporated in the late game of Lord of the Rings Online. And they've also done it in Star Wars The Old Republic as well, where you can go through some of these heroic dungeons, some of these storylines, and you can do them in solo mode. They give you a bot or they give you some assistance so that you can go through and do them solo. And I think that's good, but it's a balancing act. If they want to encourage group play, then they have to make the group play really worth it. If they want to encourage solo play, they have to make the solo play more worth it. And where do you find that balance?
And then that puts a lot of pressure on the rewards for that content, because if we make the rewards something that a solo player also needs, then we're making them go into a group when they may not want to. But if we make the solo, or we make the rewards for that type of content the other way, where it's not something you need, then why do people do it in the first place? I do think, though, that overall, the idea of getting with a group of your buddies or random strangers and doing like a 10-man fight on a huge like dungeon or whatever with a big boss at the end that requires mechanics, like that is really cool and appealing.
Yes. The second question was about solo self-found and if they're planning to implement this. His answer was interesting.
I think it'd be cool. Nothing to announce today.
Then we asked about PvP for the PvP community that's out there for Diablo 4. We asked about development of additional content for those players.
Don't have anything to announce when it comes to PvP specific content. I would say I think we would be more interested from those people. Like, what would they want to see from us? Do you want like an arena type system?
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm really not that much into PvP, honestly. I like the idea of the solo self-found. I think that would be a very interesting thing, and that's one of the things I liked about Path of Exile. Excuse me, is they have solo self-found. But PvP, it's not. I mean, to me, it's just not something that's all that interesting.
System where we pre-program your gear for you? Do you like open world? Do you want some type of different progression system? You know, kind of like the group versus solo play, the PvP versus PvE discussion is a little similar of like, the more that we emphasize it or give unique rewards to it, the more that we're saying to everybody that doesn't want to do that, hey, you must do this to progress your character. So like, what would they want to see? Do they want to see a better way of interacting with PvP? Is it just that the balance is crazy? Because I think that people kind of embrace the crazy balance in Diablo PvP. But that's where I think I would start the discussion.
Clan management has a small issue in which you can't see how long it's been for people to be offline, so we asked if they're planning to change that.
I'm not involved with that group, so I can't give it. I actually don't know, but I feel like that's very reasonable. I think we could bring that back to the team pretty easily. I will say we do have a team that works on like UX issues, user experience issues, like, you know, the ideas that we get over like group finder or armory party finder. This type of support.
I'd like to see some of that.
That's looking at it. I know that they're working on stuff, but that seems very reasonable to me.
Asked about non-combat pets. This is something that was in Diablo 3, and they do seem to be doing more Diablo 3 related content lately.
We have discussed it. I think it'd be cool. Don't have anything to share.
This brought us to deep.
Oh, I would love to see them get a pet that would just go around, even if it's just collecting gold, anything that is, any gold and any mats, just run around and do that would be great, because you know it takes the paint off the clicker armor every now and then. If they could just do that, just have something that would go around and pick up anything that is mat related, anything that is money related, and just have to pick it up for you automatically.
DPS meters potentially on dummies.
Think it's cool. Don't have anything to announce.
That would be good.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but I'm actually thinking a little bit more about that. And maybe feedback would be useful of like, is it really only on dummies that you want to do it to test builds, or would you want to see it in the rest of the game? DPS meters are kind of notorious in other game types, but I'm not sure that we have the same problems. People being upset with each other for not doing as much damage and all that kind of stuff.
I then asked about the offline mode and if this is something that could potentially be added to Diablo 4.
I have not heard any discussions about it. I would doubt it.
Glyph leveling outside of Nightmare Dungeon. Is there any quality of life for glyph leveling was the next question.
That's a good one.
We talked about it a bit. Nothing to announce. I think kind of going back to the idea with Helltides and Whispers, I think it is cool to have a less efficient way to do something while you're being efficient doing something else. That's my personal opinion though, and kind of what I
like
feel,
that.
But I'm not on the systems team and don't know the nuances of glyph leveling specifically and why we keep it in one place, but I wouldn't be surprised, I guess is what I would say, but I don't have a guarantee there.
After that, we asked about surprise events. Can we get, for instance, Goblin Vaults? This is something from Diablo 3 as well.
We've added a couple in Season 4, kind of mini events where like you have a chance when you kill an elite and it'll spawn into like a ton of gold or a ton of materials or things, or give you way more than normal. We like the idea of surprise events. I think you can expect us to make more in the future.
Then we got into interesting question that Ghazzy asked about support builds and their viability within Diablo 4. One example of these would be like the ZDPS builds from D3.
We were a lot more scared about it when we launched the game. I remember people kept asking me, like, Adam, can we make more support builds, make more things? Of like, cross synergy is really cool, and I agree it's cool. The other side of that is kind of that issue we deal with forever of group versus solo play, is that the better we make a support build, the more we're saying the best way to play this game is to go with 4 people, support your friends, and you get multiplicative, massively increased amounts of output, right?
Yeah, that's a problem that they really have to balance on. I know some people who prefer, for instance, in Path of Exile, they prefer playing aura bots. You'll see them, they'll run like 15 different auras, and they'll just take, that one character, they can't do anything on their own. But if you put them with a group with some other really high-powered characters, they can just blow everything away. And I'm really glad that they're not focusing on that, because to me, that just doesn't sound like fun play, and it sounds like it's a crutch. To me, it sounds like it's a way to get extra power. I really think you've got to quote the old Hollywood Squares line, if you want that square, you got to earn it yourself.
We do want it. We have it a little bit with Barbarian Shouts, right? And we've even added some legendaries that do it. Like there's a Druid one that turns your Blood Howl into an AoE buff. But I don't think it's one of those we have to walk the line very carefully, I think, because it can be very detrimental to the game if we go too far.
There was another question about community events and whether or not there's going to be larger scale launches that the community are involved in. For instance, maybe the community designs a legendary item.
I think it'd be awesome. I'm not against it at all, but those are checks that I can't cash. So, yeah, I would love to. I'm not going to make it, but yes, I would love an AQ event like that in D4 or something, or even community making a legendary. Oh, how scared am I of that?
Oh yeah, that reminds me. I was part of some of the one of the servers for the WoW event when they opened up Ancuron. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, that was a huge event that was done with the community, and literally the entire community had to open this zone. They had to get resources together. They had to kill mobs. They had to do all sorts of activities together as a community in order to open up this raiding zone for the people to use. That was a fantastic thing, and I'm hoping they do incorporate something like that down the road in Diablo 4, bring the whole community together and have them open up something together. I think that would be great.
I don't know, probably, but we can find a way to balance it. I don't know. I think it'd be cool.
Was once again asked in this interview about a map overlay. Here's his response on that.
This is personal Adam thoughts, not company thoughts, because everybody has different opinions, I think, and we've talked about map overlay internally quite a bit. There's such obvious pros and cons, and I think different types of players really want to engage in different ways. I personally am not completely against a map overlay being in the game, but I understand why there are people that feel strongly that, you know, we really don't want to try and make a game where you're looking at your map the whole time and not all of this beautiful world and art and things that we've created to try and immerse the player, and then they're so into the systems and the efficiency game that we pull them out of it. We know.
Yeah, honestly, I watch a lot of streamers when they do D2 and they do Path of Exile, and on the screen you can literally see the map there. I don't personally like playing that way. I mean, yes, it's much more efficient, but I like the artwork. I really like the artwork that Diablo 4 is doing. I like the artwork that Path of Exile is doing. I like the artwork in Last Epoch. And I really think that Adam is right. It takes away, it puts you more into the efficiency mode, and it takes away from the game aesthetic, and it takes away from what all the designers and stuff did to the game. So it's really that hard thing. I'm personally, I don't think having a map overlay in D4, I think that's a good thing. But I can understand from an efficiency standpoint because I watch all these streamers that do it, and I watch all these high-end players that do it in multiple games, and I can see how efficient it is and how fast they're able to do things, much faster than I am. But it's one of those things that it takes away from the game.
know it's an efficiency game, but we don't want it to feel that exposed all the time that you must feel pressured to do things perfectly all the time. And a map overlay pushes that pretty hard. It changes the game pretty fundamentally for a lot of people. And
yes, it does.
It's kind of like DPS meters in many games too, I would equate it to. Like the moment you introduce that, you kind of can't go back and you've changed how people interact with your game forever.
Got a maybe when it goes to an ultimate button. His answer was just, maybe.
Maybe. We thought heavily and worked long and hard deciding the number of buttons that you're going to have total on your bar at all. And those buttons were determined by thinking of how many different actions do we want a player to worry about at any given time. There's also would need to be a lot of rebalancing of ultimates when we fully expect people to have one versus that they can choose whether or not they do. That work we could do, I think. It's more of like, do I want to balance and design everything assuming a player has an ultimate in addition to all of their other skills, and what that means to how we have to change ultimates or do other things. I think it's doable, but I don't know that I'm very excited about the prospect unless there's a very clear win.
Yeah, for instance, in the action MMO Neverwinter, one of the buttons that's on your screen as you level up, you get an ultimate button. So it is always there. You don't have to dedicate anything to it. And I really think it changes the way the gameplay does in that, because then because everybody gets an ultimate. So everybody has that. So they have to balance all the encounters around it. And the way D4 does it, you don't have to have an ultimate. For instance, I enjoy sorcerers in D4, and I don't normally run conjuration builds. So that the whole conjuration portion of the tree, I don't have anything from it, which means I don't worry about the abilities that improve conjuration and such, so that it tends to change the way I'm focused, so I can be more focused on certain other aspects. But everybody having an ultimate can tend to throw that off some.
A couple cosmetic questions here related to a color wheel. Seems like that's possible. We asked about non-horse mounts. Here's his response on that one.
I think we should, and I wouldn't be surprised if we did it, but I'm not involved in those
That could be
conversations,
interesting.
But I personally feel like it's a no-brainer.
Then we asked about wings. This is sort of a controversial one, as some people actually don't like wings within the Diablo series. Makes sense. So this is his response to that one.
Yeah, that's a little more controversial. Return to Darkness was one of our big guiding philosophies when we were making D4 up to launch. And this idea that, hey, this game is going back to kind of D1, D2 roots of being scary and a little
Which
more,
I like.
gruesome and dark and dreary. And we even tried, even with the combat, that's why we have Evade, is like you have to dodge attacks and really plan because this world is dangerous. In some ways, we've learned that players, want to blast and they don't care as much as we over-indexed a little bit on it.
Sure.
We still, but it is still something that we care about. So like now it's just before Wings was kind of in that.
Yeah, it doesn't
It's
fit
making
the
the game a little
vibe as
bit.
much.
It
Yeah.
doesn't fit the vibe we're
I
going
get it.
for, but we've moved a bit. But have we moved enough that Wings are okay now? I don't know.
Yeah, they incorporated wings, as a cosmetic option in Diablo 3, and it's okay. But actually, the ability to have wings in a Diablo game, no, I don't think so. I mean, I even think it's a stretch in World of Warcraft for the demon hunters to have them, even though it makes sense from a character point. Also, I know in EverQuest 2, you can have wings as the fairy races, and they can actually, if you activate them at the right time, they actually count as a feather fall. So you can fall long distance using your character's wings and not take damage. I know, for instance, another thing very similar to that is undead in WoW. You can breathe underwater because you technically don't need to breathe at all. So it kind of brings a different balance, and it for certain character classes it might be too much power, and also I think it kind of takes you out of the story in some respects too.
Asked about cosmetics for minions, perhaps.
I think it would be cool. It's a lot harder to do for minions than for
Yeah.
players, though, or even like Wings, because you can have a million minions on your screen, and how loud that is a concern. But I don't think it's an impossibility.
And then we had a couple meme questions like cow level.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
And of course, I had to shout out Rax by asking about Uber Tomb Lord.
I think it'd be cool. I'm down. I don't know whatever you want to fight. I mean, we can make it.
At this point, we basically said,
Yeah, I like his response to the cow level, and I like to throw back to Rex too. Rex is another one of the streamers that I would watch on occasion. I just wanted to go ahead really quick, take a second that I really appreciate what Darth and Ghazzy did here, and Rax as well. I may cover his video at another time, depending. But I really think that it was really nice of the D4 devs to take their time out and to talk to the streamers, the people who play the games a lot, and get their answers to things. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, down below, there'll be links to the short version, which is the one that I'm doing here, the full, I think it's 2-hour-long version of the Tavern Talk discussion, and then, of course, to Darth's stream on Twitch, where he does Tavern Talk every Tuesdays. And I encourage you all to sign up for his streams, sign up for Tavern Talk, and sign up for mine as well. Hit the like and subscribe down below. I'm also on Twitch. I stream a couple of times a week. I stream ARPGs, I stream MMOs, and I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Have a good day, and hope you enjoyed the video.